Very good. All right, I think we can call this meeting to order. Meeting of the PFA Mitigation Advisory Committee today, November 12th. We'll begin with roll call. Andy, if you could please lead us through a roll call.
Yep. Good morning, everyone. I'll call your name if you could respond in the affirmative if you're present. Chad Washington.
Here.
Scott Lightcap.
Present.
Courtney Greasel.
Here.
Courtney, is that how I pronounce your last name correctly? Okay, thank you. Fran Cafarata. Andrew Perkey.
Here.
Mark Stern.
Here.
Mark Renbrammer. Jennifer Weichel.
Here.
Kate Wells.
Here.
Chris Allen. Sarah Gregory.
Here.
Okay, you do have a quorum. Hand it back to you.
All right, very good. Next, we can approve the agenda. Has everyone had a chance to review the agenda? All right. Just give a thumbs up or say yay. Let's get that approved. Great. Next item, we've got the consent agenda, which consists of the meeting minutes from our last meeting in October. That was also distributed. Has everyone had a chance to review the meeting minutes? Any requests for corrections? Okay. Get a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll move to approve.
I second.
Great. We got a motion and a second. Everyone that approves, say yay or raise your hand.
Yay.
All right, approved. Next, we've got public comment. Before we open it up for general public comment associated with today's meeting, I'd just like to offer that we have a MAC member who is not joining us, and that's because Bob Salinger has sadly passed away. So at this moment, I'd like to open the floor for any public comment to recognize Bob and what he did for conservation. After that, we will move to general public comment. So at this time, if there's anybody that would like to say anything, I'd open that up now. I see Andrew Perkey, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, Andrew Perkey. And I didn't know Bob super well personally, but I had a lot of friends in Portland that were very close to him in various phases of his life. And I was really excited when he joined this committee because everything I've always heard about Bob was proven in the short time he was with us, which is that he was incredibly smart. He was incredibly dedicated and also incredibly respectful. I really appreciated the fact that even when he disagreed with somebody, he disagreed with respect, and I think kind of modeled the sort of behavior that we need more in our society. So I just am grateful for the short time that I got to work with Bob, and really sorry for the people that knew him and loved him that he's left us at such a young age.
Thank you for that, Andrew. Bob Van Dyke, first, welcome back. It is great to have you joining us today. And welcome any comments you have.
Thank you. Thank you, Chad, and thank you to Mark Stern for reaching out and letting me know about this opportunity. For the record, Bob Van Dyke. I live in Forest Grove, Oregon. I've known Bob for a while. I really started paying attention to conservation issues about 10 years ago. Focusing on forestry issues, state forest, private forest, but also fish issues, or the forest fish intersection. That's when I met Bob, and I worked with him on two big things. Well, they seem big to me. One is the Elliott State Forest, and the other is the Private Forest Accord, which created this committee. Bob was in charge of amphibians for the conservation team and negotiating. We sort of divided up the work. And anyway, he had a huge imprint. When I met him, he'd already been at it for 20 years by the time I met him, with all kinds of accomplishments. And I was always struck by, while I was busy on the things, the Elliott or the state forest or private forest, Bob was busy on those too, but he also had like 19 other things he was doing. All the Portland environmental issues, wildlife, coyote hunts, all kinds of things. So anyway, he was a dynamo and he'll be missed. I want to mark his passing by reading a poem for you all today. It's a very short one by Walt Whitman. It's called "When I Heard the Learned Astronomer," and I will. Some of you may know it. I will send it to you for the put in the meeting record as well. "When I Heard the Learned Astronomer" by Walt Whitman. When I heard the learned astronomer, when the proofs, the figures were ranged in columns before me, when I was shown the charts and diagrams to add, divide, and measure them, when I, sitting, heard the astronomer where he lectured with much applause in the lecture room, how soon, unaccountable, I became tired and sick, till rising and gliding out, I wandered off by myself in the mystical moist night air, and from time to time looked up in perfect silence at the stars. Bob, I hope you're in some perfect silence now, or at peace. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Bob. Mark Stern.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. Thanks, Andrew. Those are all good thoughts. You know, I got to know Bob about 5 or 6 years ago when we were both appointed. I was paths much with Bob, but you know, in the Elliott Forest, I just became amazed as Andrew and Bob shared how much Bob dug into the facts and the detail, and he's very compassionate. He listened really well. He was thoughtful. He listened carefully. He was always clear to make his point. He wasn't afraid to make his point, and he could make it firmly, but he did it in a very authentic, genuine way that actually helped build a conversation rather than end the conversation. And he also had a brilliance with him in terms of his sort of intellectual ability to dig into detail and data and documents. And, you know, he had a law degree, so there's some background there in digging into dense stuff, but he had no problem digging into HCPs and environmental documents and teasing out the important parts and bringing forth those parts to the conversation and the discussion. And you know, it was always amazing to see him sort of deliver something in your inbox. It was there at 7 a.m., meaning only that he had worked on it into the wee hours of the night or into the morning as well. He just had a warmth and a commitment and a dedication to conservation that was just unmatched and unparalleled. So he was a great contributor. I really admire him and respect him. And it's a loss for everybody, especially his family, of course, but kudos to Bob. He did a lot for everybody. It was an honor to know him. So thanks for the opportunity to share that.
Thank you, Mark. His contributions to this committee will certainly be missed. Any other comments on this? Okay, we will carry on with the rest of our meeting now. I'd like to first offer the opportunity for members of the public who have joined us online to introduce themselves if they would like. If not, there's no requirement to. You're welcome to stay silent if you would like. And then open it up for public comment as well. All right, Andy, it doesn't sound like we have anybody that's going to be introducing themselves. Did we have any written public comment submitted?
No, we did not, Chad.
Great. That brings us to our next agenda item, which is the committee operating procedures. You should have all received those in your pre-meeting packets. Has everyone had a chance to review those? Great. I see thumbs up and head nodding from our new members as well, which is great. It might be the first time that you've seen those in that format. So with that, we'd entertain a motion to adopt these new operating, well, not new, but the operating procedures.
Yeah, Chad, if you're looking for a motion, I move that we adopt the operating procedures as presented to us today.
Very good. Thank you, Mark. Do we have a second?
I'd second that.
Great. Thank you, Scott. So we have a motion and a second to adopt the operating procedures. Everyone in favor say aye or raise your hand. All right. That looks like unanimous there, Andy. Those are so moved and adopted. That brings us to you, Andy, ODF staff update.
Alrighty, let me reshare my screen here, everyone. Too many windows open.
To be clear, I meant ODFW. You do need a couple more letters difference.
Just a little bit. They're not too far from us though, but all right. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Andy Spirk. I'm the Private Forest Accord Grant Coordinator. So I am just gonna, I think, Chad, you can see what's coming in on the screen right now.
Yes.
Right. I have a few slides. I want to say 6 slides I was hoping to review with the committee. And after each slide, I'm happy to kind of answer any questions and have discussion. So we don't have to wait till the end because each slide's kind of a different topic on staff report. So yeah, just right off the bat, we'll get right into it. Make sure this is my first one. It is. So our solicitation closes tomorrow at midnight. As of last check, about 2 minutes ago, we had 67 applications in draft mode. We've had 10 applications submitted. We're ranging from $80,000 to $1 million on the ask. It looks like the average ask is coming in around $300,000 to $500,000, a little similar to last year, a little bit lower, I think. We are looking to hit the same target as last year. I think we had 72 or 74 applications submitted last year. So pretty good. We are still on target. I think it's a great sign. People seem to like our grant program and our questions and everything. So happy to see them coming back. We also did a lot of outreach, which I'll get into later. Pretty diverse set of applicants across the whole board who can apply. I think when I've been taking a look at it, we're actually having a few more for-profit applicants coming into play this year, but it's pretty much the same makeup as last year. I have been having ongoing meetings with applicants, site visits with the stream bios. My colleagues across the state have been meeting on site. Overall, it really does seem like we provided more clarity this year in the application and the grant guidelines, which is great. I have had far less questions about kind of clarity and more kind of that meat on the bones questions you expect for grant applications. Again, they are due by tomorrow at midnight. I will then, assign them to the review team next week, and then we'll get into the committee review early next year. In the December staff report, I plan to give you guys an update on the review process and more precise timelines at that time when I'm going to deliver them to you guys for review. Any questions on just kind of this year's solicitation in general, even, or what you see on screen here? Happy to talk through anything.
Andy, I've got a question. I just want to confirm that you'll be discussing the diverse applicants later in your presentation. If not, then I have a question about who
I will. I did not. No, this is what I had planned for just a solicitation update. But I do have stuff popped up that I can discuss.
Yeah, I would just like to know, we flagged during the last solicitation that we didn't have many applications coming from tribal organizations. Can you just touch on your targeted outreach and if that has resulted in any tribal organizations applying?
Yes. And let me pull up as I'm talking about it. So we actually did a pretty targeted engagement earlier this summer for tribal applicants. And so what we did do is we sent a hard copy letter to each of the 9 federally recognized tribes in the state and invited them to participate. We attached our grant guidelines, contact information. That came straight from Sarah Reif, the administrator for the Habitat Division. That was pretty successful. We also sent out plenty of emails and phone calls and attended a lot of focused public-private meetings that involve tribal organizations where they talk about some tribal priorities, and we jumped in and just gave them an update that we welcome them and invite them to apply for funding. So that's what we've been working pretty hard across the last year. Give me a minute, I can at least just pull up who we have for tribal right now. Just a second, almost done reviewing it. It looks like we have one primary tribal applicant right now who's in the draft stage. From what I've seen, there's a lot, and what we kind of saw last year was that the tribes were partnering with a lot of like watershed councils, conservation districts on projects, and not being the lead or primary applicant. And that's what my indication has been, without looking at actual applications, but from phone conversations.
That's a helpful update, Andy. And thank you for doing that intentional and targeted outreach. And whether or not that drives applications, we shouldn't really tie our measure of success to that. Just that you've done that outreach is, I think, a success.
Yep,
Mark,
and thank you. I was just going to say real quick, Chad, just to wrap that up, we do plan every year we'll do this exact same outreach and engagement. So we will be sending direct letters and mailers. We'll do it even earlier next year.
Very good. Thank you, Andy. And Mark?
Yeah, and I was just wondering, and it's in this process, this go around, you had any aha moments where you kind of coulda, shoulda, woulda, dida, or, something that came up that you hadn't encountered before or expected?
That's a good question. Let me just kind of ponder that for a minute.
The other question while you ponder that, I just, I think the deadline's in the next day or so. Are we going to get 57 applications finalized in the last 24 hours?
You would be surprised what last year looked like. It was very similar, and I was getting nervous, and I was like, there's no way we're going to see 50 or 40, I think. It was a little less, hit submit. You'd be surprised with some of the questions I've gotten today, too, with how much lead time there's been. So I think we will. I think, my prediction earlier is around 50 or so that I think we'll be having submitted. We'll see what happens when it comes midnight tonight. I'm really hoping not everyone presses the button at midnight because we'll explore what might come about that. Thinking kind of about any kind of aha moments, not nearly as many as last year. Like I said, I think there's been much more clarity and guidance in our questions. Some of the biggest questions that I've just been getting as repeat is start dates. We just gave a recommendation of October 1 of the following year for your start date, with the notice that we will implement as soon as possible. But for more complex projects, you should expect an October 1st start date. So other than that, maybe some more guidance on that. But no, overall, people seem pretty jazzed about this grant program. They really appreciate the insightful comments from you guys that you've provided last year, and that the level 1 reviewers provided last year too. I've seen a lot of people come back for applications after we provided feedback. I'm now going on tandem, but I think that's about it, Mark. Nothing major that stands out in my mind that either we missed the target or we could have done much better on. I'm sure there is stuff we can improve on, and we'll look at that feedback survey next year, which everyone will get.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Andy.
great. Thanks.
Looks like Scott, you have your hand up.
Yes, I had a question similar to what Andy just touched on about the October 1st start date for project funding.
Mm-hmm.
I got several questions about that as well. And so I went in and read the kind of the grant timeline for project solicitation. And that one caught me by surprise. So realistically, for folks that are successful and get a grant awarded, they're not able to typically start work until the summer in-stream work season, which would kick them into summer of 26 to spend funds for projects awarded this spring, or the spring of 25. Is that correct? Am I understanding that right?
Yes, you are. And I'll lead or follow up to that comment with a few points. We do, after spring commission approval, we do reach out to every grantee, and I immediately begin a negotiation with them on the contract immediately. Like they get an email that afternoon saying, please respond back. And now they get put into a first come, first serve line. Many of them took a few months to respond back to that. Once they do get back to us, we have our first wave of negotiation, and they then go to our contracts team. And if it's over 250,000, it then goes to DOJ for an additional review. That said, I can give you the general so we started executing agreements in May of this year, well ahead of our October deadline. The only outstanding agreements now is not, and I'll get into it later, is because there's some needs waiting on the grantee side at this point. Our contracts team's been pretty apt, pretty into it. And this first year was a lot of lessons learned for them because this is a brand new grant program. ODFW's never implemented this kind of restoration effort before. So I do expect that to be much sooner next year. But out of an abundance of caution for these larger projects, is this October 1 start date was just the safest bet. Because when I said July 1 last year and we didn't hit that goal, we had some additional conversations. And I do recommend to grantees that call me and ask me about it. If we miss the target, if we're either too late or we push ahead and we say, hey, we are 2 months ahead of your start date, we'll work with them on that. We'll change the milestones, we'll change the deliverables, the end dates. And we are very flexible with them on both sides.
Okay, so that October 1 date, it sounds like it was almost a safety date for procedural headaches versus, okay. All right, that's good. And the other thing I did not notice in the project solicitation table was, and I'm not familiar with how long this money is able to be spent. Does it track with the biennium, or do you have an X number of years?
No, so there is no end date that we are requiring. We recommend a 4-year project timeline and encourage that. And anyone that recommends it, a higher one, I heavily encourage them to provide that justification in the narrative of the application as to why they need more time. And I think the only time we're really going to see that is going to be for an implementation project that requests post-project maintenance and monitoring. I do think we're going to see that this year. We had none of that last year. Most of our agreements were 4, 5, or 6, 3 to 6 years. But I've had some grantees interested in that post-project maintenance, and that might push it well beyond the 4, 5, 6 year threshold, depending on what that looks like. But yeah, we're not sticking to, we're able to roll it over as far as I'm concerned. So.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Andy? Andy?
Yeah, just following up on Scott, your comment, because I think where you're going a little bit for projects that have in-stream water work and want to do is putting it out 18 months or so from when they apply, just sort of following that thought process. If our RFP timeline began in the first of the year at a given point, then it might be available for the applicant to begin work that following spring. So they'd only be 1 year out in terms of a in-water work period as opposed to 2. Anyway, something to think about, because it does seem like a long time in the queue for an applicant to write a grant in October and not actually be able to not get to the project for 18 months. I don't have a solution for it, but I think it is sort of a long time.
It is.
Mark, is also just an abundance of caution. There will be some projects that get funded in time for the in-water work period of 25, in this case. But to have the October 1, it's just in case there is not the opportunity because of some procedural hiccup. We would hate to have them develop expectations to be able to begin that work this summer and then have to backtrack all of that. Is that correct, Andy?
Yeah, if I may, I'll add on to that. We've explored an earlier solicitation date, and we simply don't have reviewers available for the grant program. We have a diverse set of reviewers across the state with different agencies, local and state and federal, and they just were not available at different times of the year. And aside from that, the grantees weren't quite available to turn a grant in at the start of the year either. There's grant season is almost all season this time, except maybe the in-water work period. So we have tackled that. That was one of the first things. I know we talked about at the committee, I believe last year or the year prior, but those are the biggest hurdles. And I will say, and I failed to, we do also prioritize implementation projects. So when I'm doing the short list, I am reaching out to implementation projects, especially the ones I look at their timelines and I look at their budgets and I look at the need and talk to them about it in an honest conversation. And we will prioritize based on that. So it is still very specific, and that seems to have worked this year.
Okay.
Courtney, you have your hand up?
Yeah, and in the theme of everybody has to say something about a topic, I'll just jump in. I say it interestingly because I actually thought the timeline was thoughtful in the sense that a lot of times these grants start to feel rushed. And so it allows it to be very planful. It allows it to coordinate with other funding cycles, with often are on a fiscal year of July 1. And even some of those public-private partnership options where maybe they need to move into a municipality of some type. So I actually read it very differently and thought, gosh, this is kind of nice that it's not rushed, encourages being planful, and then doesn't obstruct kind of an end date. It allows them to sort of push the implementation into their reasonable pace. So just kind of flagging that I had put a little star next to it, not a subtraction.
Thank you for sharing that. That's helpful insight, Courtney. And it does allow for our funds to be used as match for other funding mechanisms. Is that right, Andy? Have we seen that happening?
Yes, the community very much appreciates that we have unmatched funds and that we don't, as an agency, match them to any other grant program or as a committee. Yeah, it's very, very lucrative for our grantees.
Thank you. Scott, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, just following up on what Courtney said, I kind of agree with that as well, Courtney, because I come from that world of hustling grants and working with watershed councils and all kinds of other groups, and it often was hand to mouth, and so everything was rushed to meet a in-water work start time because you know other things tend to compress that start time, so you may only have 3 weeks to do a project. So these people are hustling, and I had the same thought. I think, wow, okay, if it truly is don't start before October 1, that would be a funding source. They know they've got the money. They can, dot the I's, cross the T's, and really get their act together before the next season. So pro and a con, but I just wanted to confirm that that's what it was. And it sounds like it's kind of, it's a bit of a gray area. It sounds like some projects we can award earlier, and some bigger projects maybe will suggest going a little bit later. And maybe the wording needs to be cleaned up a bit as we go forward and update this stuff. That's all. But yeah, I see pros and cons both ways for sure.
Thanks, Scott. Well, Andy, we've had good discussion on your first slide. How many more slides do you have to share?
I was worried that we weren't, I didn't have enough topics to chat about, but no, we got plenty more. I'll move on. Thank you for that feedback. I really appreciate it, as always. I did include the review timeline in this. Great. I thought I was going to wait till December for that one, but we will go over it as it's on screen. So we're closing out on November 13th tomorrow. Review period officially starts in December 1. I'll be distributing reviews to our technical regional review teams across the state. We have 5 of them as a reminder. Each team is made up of ODFW PFA Stream Bio, who leads that review team. There are then 1 ODS staff, 1 ODFW staff, and 1 U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service staff on each of those 5 review teams. I've been working with Jennifer, Chris, and Kate, and Sam. They've kindly been working with me since summer to organize this. So we should be ready to hit the ground running. I'll be hosting a statewide review kickoff meeting this month to go over the grant program, our priorities, to remind everyone. I'll be sending a bunch of information about that. But we have a lot of return reviewers, which is really nice. At least from my perspective, it means that they enjoyed the process somewhat, and they wanted to come back. I don't think many of them got forced. A lot of our reviewers expressed appreciation for the process that we set up too in such little time. And I'll get off that because we're not on the timeline anymore. So December, I'll have all the level 1 reviewers assigned. They'll have multiple planning meetings for each of their region. Usually about 2 or 3 is what we're looking at. So they'll work on their own, conduct their reviews. They'll meet with their team 2 or 3 times, talk about some ideas, talk about what they think about the need of that project in their area. They'll wrap up reviews by February, which then brings us to the committee reviews, which will take place from February to March 6th. The dates out of the deliberations 13th and 14th I'll talk about shortly, but I'm recommending a change to the 12th and 13th. But yeah, the committee will have it from beginning of February to about mid-March, and then we'll go to commission in April as planned. So that's kind of the timeline. Everyone's getting a little bit more time this year around, which I think, fresh air. Everyone was a little rushed last year. I know our review level 1 teams were really rushed. Again, we'll see how many proposals we get this time around and what that will look like. And I do believe I mentioned at that last meeting, maybe I didn't, but we are expecting to follow OCRF's review for the committee this year. So it's a little bit of a different process on what that looks like for scoring and ranking. And we can go over that in January ahead of our February, just so everyone has that fresh in their mind. It's similar but adjacent to what we do. That's kind of a review timeline. Any questions on that? Pretty straight.
Andy, I would just like to take a minute to thank our ex officio members for working with you to get those review teams in place. Their reviews are incredibly helpful when evaluating these projects. So just want to shout out to the ex officio members that helped you with that. And then it looks like Courtney has her hand up.
Just alphabet soup. What does OCRS stand for?
My apologies. Oregon Conservation and Recreation Fund. It's a nether grant program. Mark Stern also sits on that advisory committee.
Okay, thanks.
That is one thing about this committee is that we have 3 representatives from the conservation groups and with 3 from timber industry and 1 from OCRF. Your next slide there, Andy.
Yes. Okay, so this is an update on a project cancellation. Happy to answer any questions after this. I'll be relatively brief. So this was a Beaver Creek Valley Scale Floodplain Restoration and Design project. We awarded them $50,000 in our solicitation last year. It was a planning project. Officially, this project, as you see on screen here, as you kind of squint in, you're going to see a hexed out area. There are a partial south and a partial north of it. This project encompassed all 3 of these parcels on the River Mile to do a restoration, a valley floodplain restoration project. The center parcel that's hexed out, the landowner chose to pull out of the project. Because of this, we deemed it as a department that the original intent that you guys approved the project for as a committee and recommended to commission was not met anymore. So we went ahead and recommended that they reapply for this cycle since they could kind of copy and paste stuff with an updated project and an updated intent. And that's kind of where we're at. So we gave notice of termination to them. I believe they have another 2 weeks, 1 or 2 weeks to figure out a solution. But this is just an FYI to you guys. They don't believe they're going to figure one out in the next 2 weeks. Any questions on this? I'm happy to entertain it.
Andy, I would just suggest in the future, we do not list the property owner's name in the legend on that map.
Thank you. I agree.
We can go to the next slide.
Apologies, there's a lot of word soup on my slides today. I'm not following the rule. But I just want to give you guys a general program update on what's been going on. We've talked about a lot of these topics already, so apologies if I'm kind of repeating myself a bit. First off the bat is our in-person committee meeting next year. We are still determining a location for that meeting. We are trying to hold a 2-day meeting still. First day being the field trip, second day being the presentations from our regional teams, and then the decision and discussion amongst the committee for final selection and recommendation to the commission. The original dates were March 13th and 14th of next year. Commission, ODFW's commission calendar just came out, and commission is the 14th of March. So we are recommending that we change that from that Thursday, Friday to the Wednesday, Thursday. So it would be March 12th and 13th for our in-person committee meeting. And does anyone have any concerns with that? Happy to hear that out if there's a better date, but I'd like to know that while we're all in the same meeting right now.
That works, Andy.
Great. I'm not seeing any major. You put it in my notes because I'll update that calendar invite after this meeting. Okay. I don't see any no's. Great. And of course, we will have a virtual option still if you can't make it in person. Tiffany will probably be reaching out soon about hotel stays. Again, we're still looking at where we're going to have this meetings to be determined. But she'll be reaching out about 1 or 2 nights for staying in the hotel because we're planning a dinner the first night and everything with the stream bios and the committee, just like we did last year. We also will be reserving some transportation for us and everything. So when Tiffany reaches out, please, as soon as you can, just respond back to her. That'd be really helpful. Let me make the note to change this calendar date real quick.
Andy, for consideration, it would be helpful and cut down on travel to have the meeting held near where the commission meeting will be held, so that when we go and ask for support for our recommendation, we're not having to travel from Klamath to Hood River.
I do believe, and I'll double check that. It's a great point, Chad. I believe it's a virtual meeting that month. But I will double check and we'll try to coordinate the best we can. I'm trying to get us to a spot that has a really good implementation. We have a few projects that are wrapping up, and I'm about to talk about one on the next slide. But that's what I'm trying to get us out in the field at. But yeah, great point, and I'll follow up with that.
That sounds great. It would be excellent to be able to see some of how the money's been deployed and the good that it's done.
Okay. Sorry, forgive me, guys. Just taking some quick notes here. Grant agreements, we went in some detail about how we do that, so I won't repeat that process, but we are probably about 85% there on execution from last year's solicitation. The biggest delay is just getting some responses from some of our grantees, and it was expected in water work periods wrapping up the last 6-8 weeks. So we are starting to get some more trickle in responses and finalizing on those grant agreements. I do expect them to be wrapped up real soon. Hopefully in the next month here. But yeah, we've hit all of the major implementation projects that needed to be implemented by a certain date. We did achieve that. Just general program development, outside of my role in working with you guys as a committee and implementing these grants, there's still a bunch of development that's going on behind the scenes in this grant program. Keeping in mind, we stood it up real quick. We got the money out the door like we wanted to do the great work that we're doing. But I'm still refining many processes and procedures. I'm creating a lot of internal documents for amendment requests, making sure we're equitable in our amendment approvals and denials, how we revise agreements, and how we can support amendments to those agreements too. So there's still just a lot of internal stuff we're working on. I appreciate the patience as we roll that out, especially to our grantees or applicants where there may not be a process yet established. We are still working on that and trying to be as transparent as possible also. We kind of talked about guidance for grantees and applicants already. I think there's been much more clarity in this last solicitation in our grant guidelines, I've gotten a lot less questions about confused on how to apply, on what the priorities are. So I think just as a committee too, the discussions that you've all had across the last year have been very enlightening too. I do recommend to applicants to reference certain meetings. So when we have certain discussions, I will point out the specific meeting and the specific time for them to log in and look at it, and they do it. So I think it's been a really good team effort to provide that additional guidance to everyone. It's been very appreciated, actually. They really appreciate your discussion. We did talk about outreach efforts with tribal engagement. Outside of that, I'm trying my best to travel across the state to present at conferences, to present at any talking opportunity I can get. And it seems to be going well. We're getting a lot of engagement. The only thing that people are saying, going back to maybe Scott's comment and aha moment or whatever, is that there's not enough capacity for these grantees to fill out every single application every year. So if we do have less applications this year, that can be a consideration, is that they're so overtaxed with what they're filling out. That's just what I've heard is capacity. It's not that they don't want to. They just said, we will do it next year. They said it just doesn't meet the priority right now, right here, especially those affected by wildfire across the state. But that's kind of the biggest thing that I'm hearing, and that's a larger concern. But other than that, outreach is going great. Any questions on general program update?
Looks like we have one from Andrew Perky.
Yeah, just Andy, just a comment for us to just keep tabs on the political implications for federal funding sources, particularly those that were really built out as a result of the Inflation Reduction Act. It may have no consequence, but it could change the timing of how federal agencies try to push that money out. It could change whether that money comes out at all, and that could impact then people's interest in our opportunity and how they react to it. So just flagging that more than anything.
Good point.
Andy, when you're doing this outreach or presenting at different conferences or speaking engagements, it would be nice to include that in the staff update. Specifically, where are you presenting? What are some of the demographics around the groups that you're working with to include in future staff updates? It just might be nice to have a little bit more detail on how and where and with who those engagements are occurring.
Yes, I will try my best to remember to write that stuff down.
That's all that we'll ask.
I do think it's a great idea. I just happen to forget.
All right.
Yeah.
Any other questions? All right, Andy, do you have another slide?
I think this is my last one. So we had a project closeout, our first project closeout, actually. North Fork, Walla Walla River Mile, 4.3 to 6.3 floodplain restoration, just outside of Milton Freewater region in the foothills there of the Blue Mountains, I believe. The project was funded for $989,209 with the Walla Walla Basin Watershed Council. It was, let me get to my notes, actually. I did want to read something. Make sure I cover some topics. It was a really great project walkthrough. So I'm not typically planning to provide closeout updates for every single project that we're going to go through, but this one is especially important since it's the first implemented project under the PFA grants, showcasing, the program's real world impact, which was really showcased in this project, I think. Like I said, we visited the restoration on November 5th. I visited with my colleague Kirsten. I believe she's online here. She's the local stream biologist in that region. We walked through the full restoration area, witnessing firsthand the effectiveness of the project's impact. The project restored water flow across a corridor historically impacted by heavy grazing in the watershed. The area was also heavily scoured during a 2020 flood event, which dramatically altered the landscape. The project has been crucial in stabilizing and revitalizing the ecosystem in the area downstream from both of those pretty catastrophic things. They repaired numerous secondary and tributary channels throughout the floodplain, as part of a phase 1 of 3 planned phases in this project, creating essential habitat for the habitat conservation plan covered species, of course, such as pooling areas, forage zones, riffles, and other critical habitat features. Monitoring efforts for the project will continue through 2025 under our grant agreement to assess fish presence and water temperature changes, ensuring hopefully support for the ecosystem health in the long term. Outside of the benefit to the habitat conservation plan covered species, which of course is paramount in our grant program, this was a deeply collaborative project involving significant effort and pride not from the landowners who have owned the land for multiple generations in this area. The Watershed Council did really exceptional groundwork to bring the landowners on board, exemplifying strong communication, negotiation, and cooperation skills to get the project implemented in this area. It's clear that the council greatly appreciated the support from both the committee and the department, and they expressed genuine enthusiasm for the project, and of course, greatly appreciated the site tour with me and Kirsten going out that day to do the broader implications of the PFA grant program. As we approach the next review cycle, I'm really hoping that this project can serve as a testament to what our grants really can accomplish. While the primary goal is to protect the habitat conservation covered species for the project, this really highlights the broader benefits of our program, restoring critical areas across Oregon, which impacts local economies and communities in a pretty profound way. That was pretty obvious from this site tour. It was a really small community. I was overall just really impressed by not just the professionalism, but the passion and commitment shown by everyone involved in bringing the project to life. It was an awesome visit. Really looking forward to the other projects that we funded. I'm sure it's going to be just as good, just as great. And like I said, I don't plan to give you an update on every project completion, but this is our first one. It was a big one, and they did an awesome job. With that, that's kind of all I had to say. There's some different photos here. Here's us in the top part doing our site tour. This is Eric. He was the primary on the ground project manager who implemented the whole restoration. Here's Kirsten, and then here's 2 other staff from the Watershed Council who came out. This is a upstream shot, I believe, of a flood channel they fully created with our funding. And here's some more pools and riffles and jams they created with the funding. And here's how they spread the water out over the landscape. Before stuff was just a very channelized corridor that was not channelized in the most appropriate way, and it really impacted the habitat in that area and the ecosystem. So they did a great job. But that was, if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
I appreciate that you're not planning to do one of these closeouts for every project, Andy, but I'm sure you didn't mind going and visiting the Milton Freewater area on a sunny fall day. So
No, and we will be.
Really nice time.
We will be doing site visits for every closeout. I just won't be updating you guys on every closeout.
Thank you. Looks like maybe a great location to host our March in-person meeting and do a site visit ourselves.
Yeah, nice long walk too. It's beautiful. Good idea.
Real quick, Scott, you had your hand up for a moment.
I did, but you kind of touched on it. I was just going to ask Andy, if he planned to do a site visit on all these implemented projects, and throw out a kind of a harebrained suggestion, just because, in my past life, doing what you just described, these post-project reviews was so helpful motivationally and instructionally, to learning what works, what doesn't, and doing that follow-up. And I know we have one day allotted to that as a committee at our in-person meeting, but if at all possible, I would suggest we look for more opportunity to get committee members out to that. I don't know. I'm new, and so I don't know everybody's experience, going and actually looking at this stuff on the ground, kicking the tires, so to speak. But that's where you really learn. And so if we can somehow encourage more of that, either on a volunteer basis throughout the year as you're going out, if you happen to be close to where one of the committee members lives, like throw out an invite, or, give us the chance to say no. But yeah, that was great. So thank you.
I appreciate that, Scott.
And I would just add to Scott's, it's where you learn, and it's also where you get inspired, and particularly on a day like that. And I just wanted to add too that my business partner in our small consulting firm, Amanda Cronin, is actually leading the Walla Walla 2050 planning process, the community-wide effort to restore the Walla Walla on both sides of the state line. And one of the priority strategies is floodplain reconnection and restoration. So I definitely will share this with her, but also if we do want to follow up on the Walla Walla, we're actively engaging with the stakeholders there, including the Watershed Council on this work. So opportunity to learn about that, how this fits in the broader effort too, which I think is another valuable thing. It's not just a one-off project, but what is this trying to get done and who's leading the effort to prioritize what is going to get done.
Exactly. That larger, thank you, Andrew, for bringing up that larger watershed scale planning effort across the state lines. They talked heavily about that, and this is definitely a part of that machine that they're working to create in an effort. And the Walla Councils seems to be a great leader in it too.
Andy, I think it would also be helpful to have a few of these example projects where we can talk about them when we go to make our recommendation to the commission, to let them know what type of projects have been funded and see the successes when they're considering the next round of funding.
Yep, I'll put a note in that as an idea as we kind of form the next commission packet in April. Thanks for that.
Thank you. All right, now I believe we are at closing comments and meeting wrap up. So is there anything that committee members would like to offer for the good of the order? Mark, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Andy, thanks for the staff update. I think that was really informative and helpful. One of the more detailed ones you've done, and just nicely done, nicely presented. And thank you for that effort. Much appreciated.
And a reminder to everyone that we will not be having a meeting in December. That will just be a written update provided by Andy. Great. Well, we've adopted our operating procedures. We discussed the project that was canceled, understand why it is just changed and they can reapply this year. Heard about some of the successful project closeouts. We got our review timelines. Is there anything else that we want to make sure we discuss, or I think we're good. All right. Well, with that, we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye now.
Thank you, Chad. Have a good day, guys.